The tomato bisque was scalding hot. I felt it burn my face first, that searing, wet heat that makes your skin scream before your brain can even register what's happening. It splashed into my eyes, clouded my vision with that thick orange-red film, and dripped down my chin onto the cream-colored dress I'd worn because my son said it made me look elegant. The soup hit the expensive Persian carpet of the Grand Oak Country Club ballroom with a soft, wet splatter. The sound of $500 in dry cleaning bills and a ruined heirloom dress. But that sound was nothing compared to the silence that followed. 53 people. 53 wedding guests, family members and friends, and hotel employees. Every single one of them went dead quiet. You could have heard a champagne bubble pop. And then there was Patricia. She stood over me, her red sequin dress catching the chandelier light like some kind of demented disco ball. Her champagne flute was still clutched in one hand, the empty soup bowl in the other. And she was laughing. Not a nervous laugh. Not a, oh my goodness, what have I done laugh. No, honey. This was the laugh of a woman who had finally done what she'd been wanting to do for 6 long months. The laugh of someone who believed with every fiber of her designer-clad being that she was absolutely untouchable. Oops, Patricia said, loud enough for the entire room to hear. She tilted her head and smiled like a cat that caught a mouse. Maybe that will wash the dirt off you, you peasant. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a single tear mixing with the bisque that was still burning the delicate skin around my eyes. Instead, I did something that scared her far more than any outburst ever could. I smiled. It was small, quiet. The kind of smile I give when I know something others don't. Then I wiped the soup from my eyes with the cloth napkin from my place setting, slowly, deliberately, stood up straight, and walked toward the bathroom with my chin held high. Behind me, I heard Patricia's braying laughter continue. Did you see her face? Like a tomato, fitting for a woman who probably picks them for a living. More laughter, her sycophants joining in like trained seals. I pushed through bathroom door, locked it behind me, and looked at myself in the mirror. My face was red and blotchy where the soup had burned. My dress, the one I'd worn to my own husband's funeral and carefully preserved for special occasions, was ruined beyond repair. My silver curls were matted with tomato. I looked like a mess. But my eyes were calm as still water. I reached into my small clutch purse, the one Patricia had mocked earlier for being vintage, and pulled out my phone. I made one call. When I walked back out of that bathroom 12 minutes later, my face was clean, my hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and I was wearing a spare blouse. I looked like a woman who had just been humiliated, but I walked like a woman who owned the building. Because I did. By the time I took my seat again, Patricia's life as she knew it was already over. She just didn't know it yet. Now, honey, let me tell you how we got here. Pour yourself some sweet tea and settle in. My name is Eleanor Mitchell. Most folks call me Ellie, but my grandchildren call me Auntie Belle because when they were little, they couldn't quite pronounce Aunt Eleanor, and it came out sounding like a bell. The name stuck. I'm 60 years old. I drive a 1989 Ford pickup truck that my late husband Harold restored with his own 2 hands before the cancer took him. I wear clothes from the same 3 stores I've shopped at for 30 years. I don't own a single piece of designer anything. To look at me, you'd think I was exactly what Patricia saw, a simple woman from a simple background, living a simple life. And that's exactly what I want people to think. Here is what almost nobody knows. I am the silent owner of the Mitchell Hospitality Group. 12 luxury hotels across the state, 8 high-end restaurants with Michelin stars, 3 exclusive event venues, and the crown jewel of my collection, the Grand Oak Hotel and Country Club, where my son was about to get married, where Patricia, my future daughter-in-law's mother, had insisted he get married. The irony was absolutely delicious. When Harold passed 15 years ago, he left me a small hotel his father built in 1952. Nothing fancy, just 20 rooms and a restaurant with the best biscuits in the county. I could have sold it and retired. Could have spent my days quilting and letting grief swallow me whole. Instead, I worked harder than ever, reinvested every penny, bought failing properties and turned them around, hired good people and treated them like family. Quietly, without a single headline or magazine profile, I built an empire. But I never changed who I was. I still drive Harold's truck because it makes me feel close to him. Still live in our farmhouse. Still make strawberry preserves and enter them in the county fair every August. And I never, ever brag about money. Patricia, on the other hand, couldn't seem to do anything but brag about money she barely had. I met Patricia 6 months ago when my son Mark brought his fiancée Sarah home for Sunday dinner. Sarah was a sweetheart, genuinely kind, soft-spoken, helped me cook without being asked. She complimented my quilts with real appreciation in her eyes. I loved her immediately. Her mother was a different story entirely. Patricia arrived 45 minutes late in a Mercedes she mentioned 3 times was the new model. She wore Chanel, announced twice, and carried wine she made sure to say cost more than most people's car payments. She looked around my farmhouse, the home where I'd raised my son and nursed my husband through his final illness, and her lip actually curled. She said, "How rustic." That was the first cut. Over 6 months, there were many more. She mocked my dated wardrobe, asked loudly if I was doing okay financially after seeing my truck, suggested I should think about assisted living because I was clearly struggling to keep up. Each time, I smiled and stayed quiet. See, I knew things about Patricia. Her husband, Richard, was a middle manager, passed over for promotion twice. Their designer lifestyle? Credit cards and prayers, honey. All flash, no foundation. I waited. I watched. I stayed silent. Then Patricia decided to plan the wedding. "We're booking the Grand Oak," she announced, eyes sparkling. "It's the most exclusive venue in the States. I've negotiated a fabulous friends and family discount. I know people there." She winked at me like sharing a great secret. I smiled and nodded. She didn't know people. She knew my people. I had personally authorized that discount because my son was getting married at my hotel. Patricia thought she was special. She had no idea the woman she kept calling peasant could buy her life 10 times over. The rehearsal dinner was held in the Grand Oak's Grand Ballroom. 20-foot ceilings, Vienna Czech crystal chandeliers, and silk wallpaper that cost more per square foot than most apartments rent. I had overseen that renovation myself, picked those chandeliers personally, knew every inch of that room. But that night, I walked in like any other guest. Just Mark's mother in a cream dress and her mother's pearls. Patricia was already holding court, her red sequin gown catching every light like a warning flare. Valentino. Custom made. But I'm sure you wouldn't know the difference. I took my seat and let the evening unfold. By dessert, Patricia was on her 5th champagne and decided it was toast time. "I want to say a few words," she announced, standing and clinking her glass, "about this wonderful occasion. My beautiful daughter is marrying Mark."
The pause before my son's name was just long enough to be insulting. Mark is a lovely young man, despite his humble beginnings, but we can all agree he's marrying up. Nervous laughter from her side, uncomfortable silence from ours. And I must acknowledge his mother, Eleanor, the woman who raised him in that adorable little farmhouse. I asked Sarah what Eleanor does for a living. She said Eleanor makes quilts. Isn't that precious?
She said quilts like it was something shameful. Some of us are meant to be the help. So here's to Eleanor, the dowdiest mother of the groom I've ever seen. May your son's marriage elevate him to heights you could never reach. She drank. A few friends joined her. No one else moved. I stood up calmly. Thank you, Patricia. That was memorable. I pulled a wrapped package from my bag. I'd like to give Mark and Sarah their gift now. I handed it to Sarah. She unwrapped it with shaking hands. Inside was a quilt I'd spent 8 months making. Fabric from Mark's baby blanket, a scrap from Sarah's first date dress, squares from Harold's flannel shirt so my husband could be part of this day. Every single stitch made with love. Sarah burst into happy tears. Ellie, it's beautiful. I've never seen anything like it. Mark hugged me tight. Mom, this is incredible. This must have taken forever. 8 months, and every stitch was worth it. For a moment, the room was warm with genuine emotion. Then Patricia struck. Oh, for God's sake, she snapped, marching over. A blanket? My daughter is marrying your son at the most exclusive venue in the state, and your gift is a blanket from your sad little sewing room? Mom, Sarah gasped, stop it. But Patricia wasn't listening. She snatched the quilt from Sarah's hands. This is garbage, she declared, holding it up, something you give to poor people out of pity. And she threw it on the floor. The quilt, Harold's memory woven into every square, landed on polished marble like a discarded rag. The room gasped. I bent down to pick it up. That's when I felt the heat. The soup bowl came down before I could register what was happening. Scalding tomato bisque, fresh from the kitchen, splashed across my face, into my eyes, down my neck, soaking my dress. I gasped. The pain was immediate and searing. Through the orange-red film clouding my vision, I saw Patricia standing over me, empty bowl in hands, smiling. Oh no, how clumsy of me! She covered her mouth in mock horror, but her eyes danced with cruel satisfaction. Look at her. She looks like a wet rat. Someone get the peasant a towel. Her friends laughed, nervously. The soup dripped down my face, into my ears, down my neck. I could feel blisters forming, and Patricia just kept laughing. I stood up slowly. I didn't wipe my face, didn't cry out, didn't give her a single thing. I just looked at her. Something in my expression made her laughter die in her throat. For 1 second, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. It vanished quickly. She lifted her chin. What are you looking at, you old bat? She sneered. Nothing at all, I said quietly. Then I walked toward the restroom with dignity, soup still dripping from my chin and burning my skin. The Grand Oaks ladies' room is beautiful. Italian marble sinks, gold fixtures, velvet chairs. I designed it myself during the renovation. I locked the door and looked in the mirror. Red, blotchy face, ruined dress, matted hair. I looked exactly like what Patricia wanted me to look like. A victim, a peasant, a joke. I stared at that woman for a long moment. Then I smiled. Well, Harold, I said to my reflection, time to stop being polite. I pulled out my phone and called Robert Chen, my general manager. It rang once. Mrs. Mitchell, is everything all right? Security mentioned a disturbance in the ballroom. Robert, listen carefully. This is a code red in the grand ballroom. He inhaled sharply. In our internal language, code red meant I was personally involved and required immediate executive action. It had only been used 3 times in 12 years. What do you need?
The woman in the red dress, Patricia Davenport, she caused the disturbance. I've seen the security footage. That was assault. We can have police here in... No police. Not yet. First, cancel her credit line completely. She has about $50,000 in wedding charges. Run her card. It will decline. Done. Second, revoke the friends and family discount I authorized. Recalculate everything at full rate. That adds approximately $35,000, $85,000 total. Good. Third, deliver the invoice personally, in the ballroom, loudly. Make sure everyone hears it. With absolute pleasure, Mrs. Mitchell. Fourth, her husband Richard works for Hamilton and Associates, our subsidiary. Put him under immediate performance review effective Monday. Pause. Are you sure that's his livelihood? I thought about Harold's shirts on the floor, about garbage, about soup burning my face while my son watched helplessly. He chose to marry her, chose to stay silent while she treated people like dirt. Now he lives with the consequences. If he's a decent employee, he might survive. If not, understood. Anything else? Bring me a spare blouse, white silk. And Robert? Yes. Everyone on staff saw what happened. Thank them for their loyalty. It means everything. Right away, ma'am. And Mrs. Mitchell, that woman deserves whatever's coming.
I hung up, cleaned my face, changed into the silk blouse, fixed my hair, and looked in the mirror one final time. The victim was gone. I unlocked the door and walked back into the ballroom. The ballroom had descended into chaos. Mark was arguing with Patricia, voice raised like I'd never heard. Sarah was sobbing with her bridesmaids. Richard was at the bar, drowning in whiskey. Patricia's friends had formed a protective circle around her. When I walked in, the room went silent again. Patricia turned and smirked. "Oh, look, the peasant cleaned herself up. How resourceful. Did you borrow that blouse from the cleaning staff?" Her friends tittered. I didn't answer. I walked calmly to my seat and sat down. "Nothing to say? Did the soup wash away with the little personality you had?" "Just waiting," I said mildly. "For what? A fairy godmother to turn you into something presentable?" I smiled. "Something like that." The ballroom doors opened. Robert Chen walked in wearing his best suit, flanked by 2 security guards carrying a leather folder. He walked straight past everyone and stopped directly in front of Patricia. "Mrs. Davenport, there's been a situation with your account." "My account? What are you talking about? Who are you?" "I'm Robert Chen, general manager of the Grand Oak Hotel. There's a problem with your payment for tomorrow's wedding." "A problem? I authorized payment weeks ago." "When we processed the remaining balance this evening, your credit card was declined." Whispers rippled through the room. Patricia's face reddened. "That's impossible. Run it again." "We've run it 3 times. The card is declined. The remaining balance is $85,000. $85,000? Patricia shrieked. "The wedding was $50. I had a friends and family discount." "The discount has been revoked. All charges recalculated at full rate." Robert held out an invoice. "Additionally, your reservation for tomorrow's ceremony has been canceled." The room gasped collectively. "Canceled? My daughter's getting married tomorrow. Get me your supervisor. Get me the owner." Robert paused dramatically. The entire room held its breath. Then he slowly turned and pointed at me. "Mrs. Eleanor Mitchell is the owner of the Grand Oak Hotel. She owns the entire Mitchell Hospitality Group, 12 luxury hotels, 8 restaurants, and this country club. She is one of the wealthiest women in this state." Patricia's face went white as fresh linen. "The woman you just assaulted with scalding soup is my employer. Additionally, your husband Richard works for Hamilton and Associates, a subsidiary of Mitchell Holdings, Mrs. Mitchell's company. His position is currently under review." Richard choked on his whiskey at the bar. Patricia spun to face me. I hadn't moved, just sat with hands folded, watching her world crumble with perfect serenity. That's impossible," she stammered. "You drive a truck. You wear clothes from Kohl's." "I do," I agreed pleasantly. "I also own this building, and that hotel downtown, and the restaurant where you had lunch Tuesday. You complained about the wine, and my manager comped your meal to avoid a scene. My manager, my restaurant, my decision." I stood and walked toward her. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. "What did you call me, Patricia? A peasant? The help?" I smoothed my silk blouse. "You spent 6 months mocking me for being poor, for being simple, for not being worthy of your daughter's wedding." I stopped directly in front of her. "But here's what you never understood. Being rich doesn't make you better than anyone. It just gives you options. And right now, I'm exercising mine. You can't. You're banned from every property I own. Your credit is canceled. Your discount is gone. And your husband will find out Monday if he still has a job." Patricia turned desperately to Richard. "Richard, do something." Richard looked at his wife, looked at me, looked at the room full of witnesses who had watched his wife assault an elderly woman and laugh about it. Then he sat back down and finished his whiskey. "Richard!" He didn't move. "Security," Robert said, "please escort Mrs. Davenport from the premises. She is banned from all Mitchell properties effective immediately." The guards took Patricia's arms. She screamed the entire way out. Threats, promises of lawsuits, shrieks of, "Do you know who I am?" The ballroom doors closed behind her. Her screams faded into silence. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Sarah burst into fresh tears. "It's ruined," she sobbed. "Everything's ruined. The wedding, the venue, my mother." I walked over and took her hands in mine. "Look at me, sweetheart. Is your mother's behavior your fault?" "No, but did she ask you to throw soup at me, to mock me for 6 months?" "No, of course not." "Then stop apologizing for her." I squeezed her hands firmly. "You are a kind, lovely woman who makes my son incredibly happy. That's what matters. That's what has always mattered. But the wedding is still on." She blinked through her tears. "What?" I smiled warmly. "Honey, I own this hotel. Did you think some drama could cancel my son's wedding? The venue is reserved, the catering is paid, the flowers are arranged, everything is ready for tomorrow. But the bill, my mother can't pay $85,000. Your mother's bill is no longer your concern. Consider it handled." "I can't let you." "You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing this because you're about to become my daughter-in-law, and that makes you family. Family takes care of each other." She threw her arms around me, sobbing into my shoulder. Mark appeared beside us, tears streaming down his face. "Mom, why didn't you ever tell me about the hotels?" "Because I wanted you to become who you are, not who my money might have made you. Your father and I agreed you'd earn your own way." I pulled back to look at him. "And look at you.
an architect who builds beautiful things, in love with a wonderful woman, exactly who I hoped you'd be. He hugged me tight. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. Now go take care of your fiancé. The wedding the next day was everything I'd hoped for. Sarah walked down the aisle radiant in white. Mark cried when he saw her. They married under a rose trellis in golden afternoon light, surrounded by people who truly loved them. Patricia was noticeably absent. She tried to show up that morning, still in her red dress from the night before, screaming about her rights as mother of the bride. Security turned her away at the gate. I'd also heard through certain channels Richard served her divorce papers before breakfast. The hotel incident was apparently the final straw in a marriage that had been crumbling for years. During the mother-son dance, Mark and I swayed to The Way You Look Tonight, the song Harold used to sing him as a baby. "Mom," he whispered, "that was the most badass thing I've ever seen anyone do." "Language," I said automatically, then grinned. "But thank you." "How did you stay so calm when she threw the soup?" "I've been dealing with people who underestimate me for 40 years. Patricia wasn't special. She was just louder than most." Later that evening, a waiter approached me. "Mrs. Mitchell, is everything to your satisfaction?" "Perfect. Tell Chef Maria the salmon was exceptional." "Anything else I can get you?" He checked his notes. "Yes, ma'am, one of our signature soups." "Bring me a bowl, nice and hot." He returned with steaming soup on fine china. I picked up my spoon, looked at the bright red bisque, and left. The soup that was supposed to humiliate me, to burn me, to prove I was nothing but a peasant. I took a delicate sip. Delicious. So, there it is, honey. Patricia Davenport thought a bowl of hot soup would burn me down. She thought she could humiliate me in front of my family and walk away laughing. She forgot one very important thing. You don't start a fire with a woman who owns the building. Last I heard, Patricia is living in a small condo 3 hours away. Richard divorced her. Her friends abandoned her. Her country club memberships all revoked. She posts bitter rants on social media now, complaining about how unfair life is. Nobody reads them. Nobody cares. Meanwhile, I'm still driving Harold's truck, still making quilts, still winning blue ribbons at the county fair. And every Sunday, Mark and Sarah come over for dinner at the farmhouse. Sarah makes the salad, Mark sets the table, and I cook up a storm in the same kitchen where I built a life worth living. Patricia tried to burn me, but honey, I was already made of fire. That's my story, sweetheart. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, treat everyone's kindness. You never know who's signing the paychecks. And if someone ever throws soup in your face, stay calm, make one phone call, and watch them learn that you don't mess with a woman who built an empire from nothing. Until next time, this has been Auntie Belle's Confessions. Sweet dreams. Auntie Belle.